Welcome to The Frequency of Courage, the podcast that ignites your inner fire and propels you to new heights of bravery and inspiration. I am so excited on this episode of The Frequency of Courage to have my friend and my human design coach, Rahme, join me today in person in Austin. This is actually the first time we're meeting in person, and yet we've talked for the past 7 months.
Yeah, we know kind of everything about one another's inner workings of our lives, but we've never met in the flesh until right now.
That's amazing. It's so awesome. So human design, for the people that are listening, they might not be totally familiar. I've shared with my network how important it's been to me and aligning to my life and being a sacral authority generator, going off of gut intuition and all of that. Can you give the Cliff Notes version for the basics of human design? And also, for those that don't know you, you have more of a data background and kind of needed the science behind it.
Yeah.
So it's not just like astrology. Can you share?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so in human design, I'm a projector. That's my energetic type. Each type has a strategy. Mine's wait for the invitation. So in real time right now, you are inviting me to speak about my experience, my perspective, my development and mastery, which is directly in line with human design. So rolling it all the way back, I am an engineer by trade. I've always been a math, science leaned kid that always came naturally to me. So of course, I look at data. I want something that is quantifiable, it's verifiable. And astrology to me, which let me preface with, I believe tremendously can support us. The way it was always presented to me was, my son's in Taurus, so I like flavors and scents and soft things. Okay, what do I do with that though? How do I navigate the world based on my disposition? And I never got a blueprint for it. In comes human design, and human design is quite literally an operating manual for your physiological flesh vehicle. It tells us where we're sending energy into the world, therefore influencing the environment around us, and where we're calling energy in from the environment, so we're being attuned by and influenced by what's happening around us. So to cut down to the core of it, human design is taking astrology. It's taking Chinese I Ching. It's taking the Jewish Kabbalah energetic plumbing system, and it's taking the Hindu chakra energetic hotspot systems. And it's taking each of these disconnected cultures that came to the same fundamental truth over history, and it's just aligning them, orienting them, and putting them right on top of one another. In other words, it's saying, you're all true. You're all right. And here's how we can orient them and put them over the top of one another and show the same truth, right? So as an engineer, as a scientist, I'm looking for this kind of, this consistency, right? This clarity. So that's how I came into human design. I'm like, oh, cool. It's kind of like religion. It's like, my God's true. No, my God's true. It's like, do you think maybe y'all are talking about the same dude, just got different names?
Right.
The same energy, the same thing, right? Just a different association. So that was my intro into human design because it clicked with my brain. Now, we know that I can go off on this, but I'll wrap it up with human design is based on the exact moment that you're born. The moment that you're born dictates the neutrino cross-section that is passing through the earth at that time. Neutrinos are tiny, tiny, tiny little neutrally charged balls of matter energy. And it is imprinted with the energy of wherever it's coming from. So think of it like scraping paint with a car, right? So it's scraping paint with all these celestial bodies, picking up energy. And then when it comes through the earth, it's scraping paint with the earth. So based on the moment that you're born, it's the energetic cross-section of neutrinos that are passing through, thus imprinting your energetic home base. So that becomes your fundamental human design blueprint. And then that blueprint then feeds into what's your energetic type, which is how you interact with the outer world, as well as your inner authority, which is how you communicate with your inner world, where you look to within yourself for clarity to make decisions. Because certain places, remember, are taking energy in. So we don't look there to make decisions for ourselves. That's telling us what's going on around us, right? We want to look to our definitions, the things that are consistently us. We want to ask those places, listen to those centers, and see what they are reacting to and responding to based on what's happening around us.
So when I randomly found you on a message board or something about like, hey, human design chart, I was like starting to hear this term and I'm like, I'm going to lean in, I'm going to get time with him. And what I loved about our first conversation, you didn't go into any of the detail. You were just like, Megan, tell me about how you approach your life. And I just was saying, well, I appreciate data. I question it. I tend to always rely on my gut instinct, my intuition. And then as we dug in, you had said, well, I did a quick Google search. And it's totally mind-boggling because of what I show up as with like an open throat. I speak up for the collective. I'm leaning into my gut all the time. So it was just mind-boggling. And then when we've, the work we've done too, I've really appreciated, since you are a projector and I'm a generator, you've been able to also help me see from an eagle eyes view where I might not really identify what my gifts and my traits are. And so I am going to curse for the first time in this podcast, where one of the reasons we're sitting here is that Jordan literally told me, Megan, it is your fucking responsibility to humanity that you have a story to share and your network. There's amazing people that it's just going to help heal the world. So can you share with me, you leaning in and kind of you threw the towel on corporate America, you're leaning into helping people align to their purposes, and such an amazing gift to be able to see people, really see them for their full potential, and what that journey has been a bit, because it isn't totally normal. Society sort of looks at it like, what? You're the healer guy wearing his Pittsburgh Steeler hat on today.
Yeah, I'm definitely a hybrid humanoid, and less from like the starseed sense, but more from, I played football and I found my identity in football, and that's a big part of my life. And I thought I had to give up blood sports. I had to give up these things that were a big part of my journey and have made me me, right? Because I'm spiritual now. And it's like, no, I am spiritual, and I have that gangster part of my roots. You know, where I come from with my lineage, I come from an immigrant family. Yeah. You know, there was a lot of hustle and grind to get to where we're at. So for me, in summary, right, math, science kid my whole life, was valedictorian in my high school, small high school, and went to University of Michigan, studied engineering. So I was on that path, right, where it was school and work at all times. And it took me until I was 26 until I came up against this unbearable resistance in my job where I couldn't take it anymore. And that's often how it shows up in our lives, where we are moving forward in the status quo. We're doing what we think we're supposed to do, what others want us to do, right? The path of least resistance. And typically what happens is one of two things, right? One, we can't take it anymore and we choose to step away. Or two, our life blows up and we can't live the same life anymore. And they go hand in hand, because either you walk away or you will come into an experience where it will blow up, right? Whether it's a relationship, whether it's a job, something will happen, whether you wanted it or not. And then all of a sudden, this is your reality now.
Yeah. And what I think is really interesting, we've talked at length about this too, is kind of the masculine, the feminine, and then also men healing society, our perceptions of how men were raised, not showing emotion and everything, and growing up in the family that you did. How has that been received in terms of how you're interacting with the rest of the world? I know we've talked about it, especially with football, right? Like that's been a good intersection point where you can relate to some of the guys that might not just sign up to do one of your men's circles, or how you work with men. So what would you say, like if there's a guy listening that definitely knows that there's things they might need to talk about, but therapy has been a stigma, what would be the initial steps you would say for someone to take that has not been really exposed, but definitely knows there's things that they need to work on?
Yeah, excellent question.
Thank you.
And invitation.
Yes.
The first thing that comes up of what I would say is you can't hide from how you feel. You can't. Same thing that I just said, same concept, is you can deny it, you can try to shove it under the rug, but it will surface. And if you don't give it a safe outlet, then it's going to blow out of you, kind of like that scene in Alien where it just, right? And how many men have had angry, at times violent outbursts, whether the violence has been directed at another human or punching a hole in the wall or breaking a thing, right? Because that energy is trapped and it needs to come out. It needs to be released. It's like a pressurized container, and you need to you need to let that out. And if you don't let it out under your own terms, it will be let out. And there's a much higher likelihood if you don't do it on your own terms that it's going to come out in an inappropriate way, possibly an extremely damaging way. So the first thing that comes up with that question is you can't run and you can't hide from how you really feel, right? So if you can't run and you can't hide, what's the most efficient way? Again, I'm an engineer. What's the most efficient way to work through this? All right, well, let's just square up. Let's look at it and let's face it. And there's a lot of analogies about buffalo and the buffalo medicine. And the idea is when the blizzard comes, the buffalo don't like turn their backs and their sides. They're like, guys, brace. The buffalo square up right against the blizzard and they march step by step in lockstep with one another. They don't run, they don't hide, they walk and march right through it. And that's my approach to this healing work is instead of spiritually bypassing or figuring out like, why is this happening for me? Instead, it's like, I'm pissed. I'm fucking pissed right now. Mm-hmm. Why do I feel pissed? Right? Well, I feel transgressed. I feel disrespected. I feel devalued. I feel pushed out. Okay, what does that remind me of from my past, right? Because the concept of a trigger is touching something that's already there. Mm-hmm. It's not a brand new thing that hits my radar. An experience or an event touches a memory, touches something that is from my past, reminding me of that, bringing that memory, bringing that energy and that mindset into the present moment, right? So we just talked in depth about an experience I just had in the last couple of months that reminded me of in 4th grade. Mm-hmm. One of the boys had a birthday party, and it was a co-ed birthday party. Boys and girls were invited, right? Small school. Everybody knows about this birthday party, and invitations are going out, and all the kids are talking about it. Invitation never came my way. And then my friends are talking about it in front of me, and I just felt completely rejected, neglected, abandoned, whatever term, that piece of I'm left out. They don't like me. What's wrong with me? Right? And as a child, I don't have these steady role models to reinforce, like, baby, there's nothing wrong with you. Perhaps you're misunderstood. Perhaps they forgot. Perhaps any of these other stories. But what I was stuck on is something's wrong with me and I don't fit in. Right? So the next step is, well, what can I do to alter myself to fit in, to be accepted? And that ends up becoming such a huge part of our paths in this mainstream modern society. To bring it back full circle, one of the things I said at the very beginning is, how can I alter and contort myself to be who you want me to be?
And then ultimately living out of alignment, feeling uncomfortable, but not in a good uncomfortable.
Living a lie.
Right.
It's like wearing the wrong shoes. Yeah. Wearing the wrong size shoes.
It's like the concept that we've talked about, like people being meat robots every day. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what are we doing here? And how is that actually getting us to a place of flow or meaningful contribution to society?
Yeah. And one more piece on that note too. So then it's like, okay, well, what's then the solution? Right. So that question is kind of what I see men facing. Yeah. And that's my response. And it's like, okay, well, where do I start? What do I do about it? Mm-hmm. And the first thing is to simply articulate your inner experience, articulate your inner dialogue. I don't have to show up with all the answers, right? I haven't sat there and done all of the homework. And then I come to the teacher and I'm like, okay, teacher, I have the answer. Instead, it's let me bring you into my process so you can see my work. So you can see at what point am I not getting the math problem, so to speak. Because if I just see the wrong answer, I got to figure out at what point did you lose the path. So by bringing people into your inner experience, one, you are peeling back the curtain and letting them see exactly what's going on. Yeah. And that is 10 times out of 10 far more valuable than simply telling somebody where you've arrived at, right? I've done all the work in private. And my conclusion is this. The conclusion really doesn't tell you a lot. And it is a form of hiding.
It's that hyphen of what's actually gone on. What's the pain? What's led you to the messy is what makes us.
Exactly.
And that's one of the reasons where I'm like, okay, it's like episode 3, episode 50 is going to look a lot better. And that's where you really want to show up. But it's actually like, this is where this type of thing gets built.
Yeah.
Curiosity question, especially when it comes to men, but also I'm glad to see like women are doing more healing. There's always been a lot more community, I think, with typically women. We talk more about what's going on and emotionally. The education system in particular in the U.S., I know this is coming up.
Let's go.
I tend to think that rather than detentions, they should offer meditation or yoga practices or something that teaches mindfulness. I have never talked to you about this, but I'm curious your perspective on, how we're helping. Because I think we both agree that like emotional regulation, nervous system regulation is kind of the life hack. How do we navigate through life, the stress that happens, flowing? What are your thoughts on that in terms of at least helping teach children?
So I roll with what comes up, right? So I don't always answer questions directly.
Sure.
What comes up is the prison system. And it's the same foundational concept. It's negative reinforcement, punishment, versus positive reinforcement, right? And we see the same thing, right? If you act out in class, it's go to detention. What happens in detention? You sit there in silence. And if you speak up, you're told to shut up, right? It's the same as the prison system. You do something bad or against the rules and you go get locked up. And if you speak up, you're disempowered. So we treat our children the same way we treat prisoners. So is it a stretch to think that maybe the education system is kind of like a micro prison for our kids? Possibly. The same energy, right? It's about the negative reinforcement. Don't do this, bad. Don't do that either, bad. Right? Think of a little kid in the kitchen. Little kid reaches for the stove. And I use this analogy a lot. A little kid reaches for the stove. Mommy freaks out. Mommy smacks his hand and raises her voice at him, and he cries. So what was she trying to do? She was trying to prevent her baby from getting hurt. And in the process of trying to prevent her child from getting hurt,
she's hurting him.
She literally is hurting him. And not only is she hurting him, he's developing a negative association with his mommy as opposed to the stove. When what we really want is maybe a cautious association with the stove, not with mommy.
Right.
And I found myself doing this, being in a relationship with 3 stepkids for 2, almost 3 years, is I could notice the part of me coming online at times that was how I was raised, which is like, hey, keep the door shut. The AC is leaking, right? What I was trying to do with any of those things, keep the lights off, shut the lights off when you're done, shut the doors. What I was trying to do was prevent my dad from coming and attacking me, right? Because if a door's left on, dad's going to find out and dad's going to come breathing down my neck. So I don't want dad breathing down my neck. So I'm going to breathe down yours. And that's what generational trauma is. We start to pass along these sets of behaviors onto the next generation. And we don't intend to do it. What we're really trying to do is just keep dad from yelling at me. But in the process, I could be the one to bring that aggressive energy. So back to the education system, right? Negative reinforcement versus positive reinforcement. Instead of do less of that, no more, no more, no more. Let's encourage the behaviors that we want to see more of. Let's reward those things. Because shaming somebody into not exemplifying a behavior is bringing shame energy to it, which in this paradoxical way is going to reinforce it, right? Because now there's a focus on shame from the direction of don't do this, don't do this. But there's now an obsession about the thing that we want less of. And now it's giving it life force. It's supercharging the thing. Right? So let that thing go. And instead of, if you don't put the dishes in the dishwasher, I'm going to punish you in this way. Instead is when you put the dishes in the dishwasher and I don't even have to tell you, we're going to do this thing that you like. And now it's encouragement energy.
And also don't go and correct the dishwasher immediately when someone puts the dishwashers in.
Let them do it their way. Let them do it their way. And then we'll
I've talked to some of my friends, like they're like talking about their husbands. I'm like, but he put the dishes in the dishwasher. That's a good thing.
Right. This is an amazing example, right? If somebody did something that was advantageous for you, but they didn't do it exactly the way that you wanted. Control freak. I'm a control freak at times too. But that's the thing. So it's an amazing point is let's celebrate the fact that your husband, who in this case, let's call him a slob. Your husband's kind of a slob and your husband did the thing that you've been wanting him to do for so long. Let that simmer. Let that set in. Let his nervous system experience like, oh, this feels good. Oh, it feels good when I do what my wife wants me to do. This feels good for me selfishly. Maybe I'll do more of this because this feels good. That's the outcome that we really want.
Positively contributing versus where they might get upset that, oh, he's not doing enough. Well, it's like if everything you do is wrong, how is that? And now I'm saying this from an unmarried perspective. I do understand that. One thing that you've really helped me with is one of our first conversations is really when we look at people, not from a judgmental perspective, but like that we're all kind of grown up children and adults being that way, and even parents. And so what's been really profound for me is I think the relationship with my parents the past year, of them noticing, I would say them being receptive too of some of the healing work that I've been doing and talking them through some things that have gone on personally within their family dynamic, that just reminding them that like how people are treating you is really a reflection of them. And also like it's never too late to explore what kind of pain, or, you know, we've had alcoholism in the family. My one uncle passed away from that, and like trying to help other people heal, where it's like, I'd love your perspective on this, because we can't push people to heal. It's holding the space. And what would you say, like, if someone's listening that's in a household where there's always an elephant in the room? And in my household growing up, I was always the one that was just talking about something. I was not going to like let something slide. How would you approach if there are those households where they don't talk about the thing, or maybe there is an alcoholic in the family or somebody that needs love and support? What advice would you give someone that's just struggling with the family dynamic?
Yeah, another excellent question. The example that comes up hearing that, and something you mentioned too, is when you try to push somebody into healing, you try to push somebody into sobriety, how it rarely works. And more often than not, it backfires, because the energy you're bringing to the table there is, I know what's best for you better than you, and I'm going to disempower you. I'm going to take away your free will, and I'm going to make you do what I say. And that's not how we get human buy-in to anything. You know, whether it's a job, giving people creative jurisdiction gets their buy-in, right? But if you ask them like, no, you don't get any input, you do it this way only, right? It's very castrating. So by telling somebody that they need to heal, and they need to heal your way on your timeline, right, is a very traumatizing, even though it's micro-traumatizing, it's reinforcing trauma. I'm not doing it right. Right? So we can't push people into it. And at times we can't even pull people into it, right? What we need to do is just lead from the front. And that is the most surefire way. It's often a longer route, because obviously if we try to push somebody into rehab, you might get them into rehab faster. But are the results going to last? Are they in there under their own free will of, it's time for me to make a massive change in my life? Or are they in there grumbling like, I'm in a stupid place because mom or husband made me here. How many days do I have left? Right? They're not going to follow through on it because it wasn't their own idea.
And are people ready to receive at that time that message? Because like a message I received today 10 years ago might not have been the same thing.
Exactly.
So that's really interesting.
It's like the movie Inception, where they go into this one guy's dream, and the idea is this needs to be his idea. So we can't just go into level 1 dream. We have to go into level 2, and I think they go way too far. That's the whole scene. But they go penetrate into sub dreams in order to plant this idea that needs to come from within this person. So in the real world, he goes, oh, this is my idea, and that's why I want to do it. Right? But he's so battle tested in this dream world that he knew that they were trying to do it. But point being is the whole scene, the whole last like probably hour and a half, is trying to get this idea implanted into this character's brain. So he believes that he came up with it, because that's the only way that it's actually going to happen, because it has to be his idea. Right? So one of I think the most surefire ways to do it, and it isn't the shortest, most efficient path, but I do feel like it's the cleanest and most surefire way, is if we want someone to come clean, well, how about I come clean about something? So if we're in a family dynamic and somebody broke something, somebody stole something, dad's sneaking alcohol, instead of like, Dad, you been a piece of shit lately? Anything you want to tell us? Like putting him on blast like that, probably going to raise his defenses. He's going to feel protective, right? But instead it's like, can I come clean about something? I cheated on my English homework last week. I didn't want to read the book. and I was too lazy to read the Cliff Notes. So the teacher's assistant gave me the TFFTTFTTF, right? The 10 true false questions. And like, I got an A, but I feel really guilty about it. Okay, like I feel lighter, honestly. And to like pause that real quick. When we come clean about some sort of deception, manipulation, a lie that we've been carrying, like we've all done it at times. And I can't do it because I will have panic attacks. I will have breakdowns if I'm holding on to a secret or a lie of some kind. Mm-hmm. So one, that I know I'm tangenting, but it is really organic. I had a moment early in my, call it my spiritual awakening, when I'm really tapping into things in a different way. And this phrase, the truth will set you free, hit in a way it never hit before. It made sense to me. The truth will set you free. Why every non-truth, every lie, whether it's just a little white lie of like, oh, you know, I'm not available tonight because of this reason. Why'd you have to add the lie reason? You could have just said I'm not available tonight,
Period.
Right? But those things become this imprisonment, right? They lock us into, and you can notice in people's postures and the way the energy gets stored in our bodies. And that's why we do a lot of somatic work, breath work, because screaming actually releases trapped energy. That's a whole separate rabbit hole. But, you know, with all of that, it comes back to coming clean. And if we want somebody to come clean, don't bully them in to coming clean about something. Go first. And it's like in a relationship, if you want to have a tough conversation, putting them on blast is going to raise their defenses. So instead, it's, I want us to have a really authentic conversation and get down to the core of our issues lately. And instead of, this is all the stuff that you're doing wrong, you. Yeah. What's the natural response? Well, this is all the stuff that you are doing wrong. So it's two people pointing the finger at the other.
Yeah.
You know what's way more effective? What's way more effective is, look, this is what I have been doing. This is how I've been showing up. And I realize that I've not been sleeping well. I've been really stressed out, and I've been projecting that stress at you. It's been really unfair. And I haven't had a really healthy environment or dynamic with you because of my own shit. So that's on me.
Looking inward first. What are we taking responsibility for?
Yeah.
How are we showing up?
Exactly.
It goes back to the children concepts of mature ability to communicate and regulate those emotions. You touched on relationships. That's where I was going to go next when it comes to the masculine, the feminine dynamics.
Nice.
And we've talked about this. I'll put myself out here. One of those big epiphanies that we had in talking was how my entire life I have been living more in the masculine. I have two older brothers, no fault, whatever, it is what it is. Started playing baseball with boys older than me when I wanted to be a cheerleader. Definitely a tomboy, competitive, and then, you know, working the NFL, then working in high tech. And
wait, NFL and tech. Male dominated, dare you say?
I joke that I trade the jocks in for the nerds.
All male dominated too.
Oh yeah. And especially so much of like my resume, it's wonderful. And there's a lot of achievements. There's a lot of accolades, all of which are external, all of which I think are accomplish, do. Mm-hmm. And even in this transitional time when, you know, the restructure and the layoff happened, everyone's like, just be. And I'm sitting there like, am I just being? Am I like, can I check that off the box for today? Mm-hmm. Like that I was being, which sounds so freaking ridiculous.
It's hilarious.
But I think when it comes to, even when I think back on relationships, and because I've always been more of the take charge person, allowing that trust and allowing life to kind of flow, I find myself, you know, at 38 now, never being married, never having kids, not really ever sure if I wanted all of those things, but I also think I'm not sure because I didn't put the energy to thinking about it. Mm-hmm. It was always like survive. Mm-hmm. And from some of my past situations and my family too, it was like, no, I want to be self-sustainable. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of time women can't leave relationships because they don't have the means to. Mm-hmm. So I kind of feel like I put full throttle, gas pedal down there. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious your perspective, because we've talked a lot about this, where I think everybody, women, men, they all have to be masculine and feminine at different times in that ebb and flow of a relationship. But we are seeing more women, especially waiting to get married and doing more of that. You know, there's nothing wrong with being the independent woman and all that stuff. But I'm the first to say, like, no, we need men too. I'm curious your perspective on like how the dynamics of relationships are changing, or maybe that's not the best way of phrasing it, but from a healthy perspective of the masculine, feminine in a relationship from your perspective.
For sure. Let's start with distinguishing what is masculine versus feminine, right? Because it's not just like dudes and chicks, right? There are certain energies, there are certain characteristics and behaviors that are innately masculine, feminine, right? Even think in Spanish, right? You have a whole subset of the language that's feminine and a subset that's masculine. How is that distinguished?
Interesting.
You know what I'm saying? So the way that I would define masculine is the boundary, it's the structure, it's the foundation, it's the clarity, it's the directness, it's the precision, right? It's the part of us that plans, it's the part of us that thinks, the part of us that strategizes, the part of us that looks forward to see how what we're doing now is going to impact the future, right? So the masculine is, in super summary, it's the boundary that holds everything inside of it. A strategy at work is a boundary that holds the work within it. So that's what the masculine ultimately gets shit done, right? The feminine is the inverse. The feminine is what fills the container, right? The feminine is the infinite color palette in between. It is the expressiveness. It is the flow. It is the chaos. It's the unpredictable. Both are needed. When it's all feminine, right? When it's all flow, when it's all chaos, it's like the example of kids on a playground. You open the door, you push the kids out, and there's no fence. And the kids freak out and they all huddle together because there's no boundary for them to stay within. So they don't actually spread out and play and have a good time. And when it's all feminine, and you see this so much in the spiritual space, and I do want to really emphasize this point because that's something I see more and more, and one of the things that I focus on as a man, especially in this very flowy space, is being very earthly, rooted here, not just off in the visionary space of like another amazing business idea. Oh, and this business idea. Okay, bring the idea back and stake it into the ground, put in the work, call in the team, build the thing. Right? Because ideas are just ideas unless you actually build them. And you see so much of that in the space. There's so much femininity where we need solidity, right? So if it's all feminine, it's all flow, it's all chaos, there's no structure. How's this getting us to where we want to get to, right? It's just kind of impulsive and in the moment at all times. Well, on the other side, if it's all masculine, it's all planned, right? It's all premeditated. It's all figured out in advance. So you go to an experience and you already have all the dinner reservations on your vacation, right? You go to a music festival and you've already determined where you're going to be and when. You're denying the magic that's present that previous you could not have anticipated for future you that's now present you.
Exactly.
So you have to have the balance. And I know I'm just talking still high level masculine, feminine. You need to have both, right? The masculine is the part of us that figures out the groceries that we need, figures out how we're going to pay for them and get them home. Right? What's nice having that feminine approach is, you know what? Even though Sunday me said I wanted this meal today, I don't actually want that meal. You know what sounds good, right? So there's just enough structure for us to thrive, just enough structure for the kids to thrive and know where the boundaries are. But there's just enough free flow. There's just enough like freestyling to make it fun, to make it joyous, to make it magical in the moment. In terms of polarity dynamics in relationships, are you talking specifically romantic relationships?
That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
But it applies either way, but let's go romantic first.
Okay. So yeah, I know I wanted to go off a little bit because we're at masculine, feminine. What does that even mean? This is how I define it, right? So in a relationship, both people carry both vibes.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm super feminine. You ever catch me on a dance floor? You're gonna see like I'm a sultry, saucy little thing. At times, you know, and you've also seen the very direct masculine, I watch football and all of these things, right? So I'm both. It suits me to have a partner who is a complementary ratio. So if I'm like 90-10 masculine, feminine, it would benefit me to be with a woman who's about 10-90, right? Because we balance each other out. A chick who needs to take charge, like, no, baby, I'm in charge. I'm heavily weighted in the masculine. The masculine takes charge. I need you to step back and receive and caretake. Otherwise, we're jostling for position.
Sure.
So, one, finding a complementary match for your ratio of masculine to feminine is essential. Otherwise, you're stepping on toes, overexpressed at a certain region and underexpressed in a different region. It's kind of like with music. If you have highs going with, as a DJ, if you have high elements going with two tracks, they're going to clash. And then you have nothing going in the middle or underneath, right? So we're empty in one place and we're doubled up and chaotic in a different place, right? But together, the unit covers the entire spectrum. And that's how it works in a romantic relationship. And how the masculine shows up. And I'm going to stretch here and maybe piss some of the liberals off. It is the man's job to hold the masculine down, to take the lead. And of course, there are exceptions to rules, but the rule is men tend to, statistically, be in that masculine role. Okay, what does that look like? It's doing a lot of the thinking, doing a lot of the planning, so the women can flow, so they can dance, so they can be more in this oracle type space where they have this, you can call it a download, you can call it a hit of inspiration, right? By men bringing the solidity, by bringing the structure and the consistency, it allows the women and the children to thrive because we're not focused on survival anymore. So that is why it is on the masculine, and I will say that, not men. There's a correlation though. It is on the masculine to provide, to protect, to support, to encourage, because that becomes that solid foundation that props a marriage up, that props a family up, that props a business up, so others can do their thing. And in response, the feminine gets to receive a lot of that support, a lot of that solidity. And in that receiving comes a lot more of the unpredictability, right? That feeling into the children.
And the play and the fun and the stress going away.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying there too, because I think there's a lot of times where without that structure, or I guess the challenge really is when you have someone like myself that's doing all of the things.
Exactly.
And then trying to translate that into this single realm of oh no, but now it's time for me to flow, or please make a decision on where you want to have dinner tonight. It's quite interesting. I also am curious, when it comes to, and this goes, I'm seeing this with whether it's friends or family, this work, the healing work, the introspection, evolving with people, integrating, all these whatever downloads, things. We've talked about this before, and I think it's a powerful concept of we purge our clothes. We purge these things that we don't need. We clean our house. But we don't often do that with the people in our life. And one of the things I wrote on my whiteboard, which was actually a letter to my younger self, which one day I'll read that on here, but it was, don't settle for what you've outgrown. And we've talked about it too with reciprocation is required, which might seem a little harsh to some people, it being a requirement, but no, there's billions of people on this planet. Reciprocation is required. So your thoughts on, I guess, for the people pleasers or the former people pleasers out there.
Who? Like us?
Right, where we don't, and we do love very hard. We care about people. And that's why I think we're both doing this work and I'm embarking in this. It's the mission of loving and helping heal the world is so much more important, technically, I think, than some feelings, but how to gently let some of those relationships go and flow. And for me, it's sort of, I kind of put things at a distance, or not that I'm slower to respond. I don't like when people ghost at all. I think that's a pretty weak way of
it's cowardice.
Yeah, getting out of something. I'm usually more direct in having conversations, but there's certainly been relationships in my life, even in family, where, I haven't talked to certain people for a long time, or maybe we have, but I'm trying to constantly think, how do I show up as the best version of Megan, the most compassionate, loving person? with anybody that I'm interacting with, whether we disagree politically or whether we disagree on some other fundamental thing, meeting everybody with love. And what has your experience been like with that in terms of the purging of people?
Oh, yeah. A lot of threads are coming up, so I'm going to try to take them slowly. One piece that comes up is it's a masculine assessment that determines this person or this relationship isn't healthy for me anymore, isn't supportive, right? Clarity and discernment is a masculine tendency, right? And then the feminine probably comes in, but we have so much history, there's so much loyalty here. And it's good to have both voices in the conversation. Just the recognition of this isn't good for me, this isn't healthy for me any longer. Whether it's a behavior, right? A pattern of behavior. It could be the use of a substance, right? Alcohol is really taking a back seat collectively, which is great. But other things are taking its place, and other things are being abused the way that alcohol were as well. So with all of these things, it's determining what's helping, what isn't. Now I want to make the distinguishment between unconditional love, conditional love. So unconditional love is I love my mom no matter what. Like no matter what. And sorry, I'm putting you on blast, Mom. Mom's crushing it lately. Like, let's preface that. This is more from history. Mom is crushing it. I'm so proud of her. And talking about healing work, right? Our family is doing a tremendous amount of healing work, right? It's a group thing. It's not something like, Mom, you got to eat some mushrooms and you got to do this thing. And she's like, hell, I ain't. You know what I'm saying? Don't tell me what to do, boy. But instead, when everybody's undergoing healing, right? It becomes what we're doing now, right? If everybody's drinking, right? A lot of peer pressure to drink. If everybody's healing, there's a lot of incentive, right? And energy flowing in that direction. So tangenting. But in this case, there is like, I can love you. I can love someone and not like them. There's a big difference trying to love you and I like you. There's people that I like, I don't necessarily love, and I want to love everybody, right? I want to Ram Dass this shit. But there's times where like, I like you, you're not as important to me as one of my brothers who I love dearly, didn't always like so much, right? So in this case, like the unconditional love means I'm going to love you no matter what. I'm going to support you. I'm going to be here no matter what, even when you piss me off. Even when you do shit you've been doing your whole life that we've talked about, I'm here no matter what. That's unconditional love. And I've given you money, I've given you time, I've given you support, and where is that gone? So here I am pouring so much of myself and my resources into your situation. And what positive benefit is coming out of this? I'm choosing to make a tough decision of cutting off my inflow, my input into this situation because it's unsustainable. I'm giving more than is coming out of it. And this isn't I don't like you anymore, I don't love you anymore. I do love you, and I love me. And I love me enough to set this boundary of this isn't working. This is unsustainable. This is out of balance. So coming back all the way to the original question is making that assessment is you don't have to dislike, you don't have to push somebody out of your life. There are a lot of different ways of going about it, but it sounds like step one is making this clear discernment that this isn't working. This job, it's not working. This relationship, it's not working. So step one is how can we shift it? And the way that I talk about relationships is like orbits, right? So I have my inner circles, like my Mercury orbit. Right? These are people that I want to keep super close to me. But when I bring somebody into my Mercury and they start to drive me crazy, they start to piss me off, right? All sorts of stuff comes up. Now I'm treating them with less respect because they're a little too close. So it's on me to be the grown up and recognize they're a little too close to home. I need a little bit more space, right? So move them out to a Venus or Earth orbit. And now it's like, this is ideal. So it doesn't have to be black or white, 0 or 1. It gets to be what shade do we want to work with this in? And with just enough distance, we miss them. We value them. They bring value to us, but too close, it's toxic, right? And that's a very mature thing we're asked to do in our relationships is to make those tough decisions of we talk too frequently or we see each other too frequently. I resent you. there's resentment present because of how invested we are. So maybe if we take some space, we back things off, maybe that resentment can shift into, missing you, back into why we got in this dynamic in the first place. So you don't have to cut people off. It is about shifting things. And at the end of the day, it's about sustainability and reciprocity.
Yeah.
Right. So and I just want to close it with unconditional love means I'm going to love you no matter what. Like I got your back no matter what. Doesn't mean I'm going to pick up every phone call. Right. Because at times things drain us and we got to look out for ourselves and have boundaries and know to what extent can I give. Anything beyond that is unhealthy for me and unsustainable for us.
Well, and I think something I want to touch on there too, boundaries being so important. And whether it's text or phone calls or all the myriad of ways someone can get in touch with us, the people pleasers tend to be quick to respond, quick to, oh gosh, I need to return that phone call. And it's like, there's very little things that are emergencies out here.
Oh yeah.
Like, and that's something that's been a newer kind of epiphany for me recently, where it was like, man, hustle to the point of like, I have to respond to all these things by the end of the day, or like, whatever. It's interesting because with those boundaries in place and saying no, by saying no to someone else, I'm saying yes to me. And I think it's really, really tough what you were just talking about, where if you are a generous person, or I have an emotional open center, I also have the head center open. So I'm just like creeping through the world, feeling all the energy and all the emotion and wanting to help, but then figuring out like, okay, I can't take all this on. I want to get to a place of not being penetrated by all of it, because that can be obviously overwhelming. But we've talked before, it's like in this space, there's all the abundance talk, which I enjoy, but it's like brass tacks. Let's get down to work. It's not just money coming down from the clouds either, right? And so I think from a boundary perspective, that's been one huge shift for me, where it's like, if this is not in alignment with my future self and the better, bigger purpose, it's okay. And in having those conversations with people that might be in my Mercury orbit, even like, hey, just letting you know, I'm going to shut my phone down on the weekend. I don't know how many people out there have tried that, but it's worth trying and having space from it. Or I go and take my dog Sky for a walk and I don't bring my phone. We're so used to, I have it right next to me. We're so used to like having this appendage, right? So I think that's a really powerful nugget in your journey, because I know what was it, like 2015 that you got out of big corporate?
2016. Yeah.
So
I went on a trip in 2015, and that was the catalyst of like, all this life I ain't living. Yeah. Oh, I got to go live more of this life. But 2016, I split.
Yeah. And I'm curious about that too, of like, of your healing journey, some of those, and this is such a loaded question because I know you're getting like downloads daily of like, oh man, that's awesome. But like anything that's really like struck you as super, super significant moments in your life during these moments in this journey, like that. I know that's a trickier question. It's tougher.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. So are you talking more of those like kind of quantum leap experiences where it feels like you just collapse time and
like
just
a life-changing moment,
like a chutes and ladders kind of shortcut experience?
You jumped levels. Yeah.
Okay. So the one thing I wanted to say before I answer that question is, as you were talking about kind of generosity and people pleasing, one of the notes about generosity is that generosity can so easily be taken advantage of. Right. And there's where discernment comes into play is, I've been talking about this, like take a penny, leave a penny jar. And it's really important to me as a man to pitch in pennies whenever I can and only take pennies when I need them. Right. And then when I see people through my lens, right, my lens is biased, but when I see people come in taking pennies, they ain't chipping pennies in, I'm going to say something. Right. I'm going to interject. Why? Because I'm looking out for the system. The system's out of balance. This ain't cool. You're taking more than you're giving. Right. So we do need to have the self-respect to know like, oh, I'm a giver. I'm a supporter. I'm a helper. Also know who's here to feast on you and take advantage of you. Right. You allow one of these succubus type vibes to come in and take all of the generosity that you're taking. All of the people that can actually benefit from your generosity are now deprived because there's somebody coming in and sucking them all up. So that is a masculine trait, is to assess and identify a threat to the system or something like that and be able to check that. Why? because everybody else who's not experiencing the benefit of what you bring to the table, they need us to do that. So all of that to say, kind of that phrase that we've talked about a bit, this isn't just like, you're strongly encouraged to look out for your boundaries and not give too much. It's your fucking job, because the people who need you, and this is me talking to you, and we've talked a lot about this, the people who need your voice, who need to hear your story, who need to feel the resonance of your experience and how that lands within them. Like, this isn't something to be taken lightly, like, oh, Megan, this is for you. Yeah, like a part of it's for you. This is so much bigger than you. It goes so far beyond you, and you are a steward to the mission. It's about the mission and your role in the mission. And you just happen to have a really profound role spearheading the mission. But it's beyond, I want to do this. You have to do it. You don't really have a choice.
I mean, I hate sitting in this chair. I was always the storyteller producing behind the scenes. So, and I have my own self-conscious stuff we've talked about too, gaining weight, stress, all that. So like, I really don't like it. And then when you put yourself out there, there's going to be comments like people are mean, and it's just
people are hurt.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole premise of like the whole topic of this being the frequency of courage, and having the courage for me to withstand that. Not in some kind of martyr sense, but like, no, this is so much more important. And if you're going to be a bully or you're going to be mean, like, good luck. I hope that, you were listening. Like, maybe you got a nugget.
Yeah.
So I know we're almost at time, but I do have one last question that I think I'm going to ask all my guests. With the story of your life, if there was a movie or a documentary about you, who would you have play you?
Matthew McConaughey.
Oh, yeah?
It's the first one that
came up. He's an Austin guy. We should, yeah.
Right? I'll sit with that a little bit more. A couple more things I want to touch on too is, right, hurt people. And one of the 4 agreements is don't take anything personally. And as hard as it is, right, when somebody touches a wound of ours, like I have a lot of wounding. I was the chubby nerd growing up. I had a lot of rejection wounds. The girls didn't like me. They liked all the other boys. That's deep. That's deep in my DNA. And I'm constantly working. I'm 33, right? It's not a tough thing anymore, but it's embedded in me, right? So that recognition of, hurt people, and the way that people treat one another is a reflection of how they treat themselves. So people who are harsh with you or harsh with us, that is a reflection of their inner dialogue. That's how they talk to themselves. So one of the cheat codes that I bring into the table is I go like, oh, this sucks to be a part of this energy right now in this moment. This sucks. This feels like shit. You can't get away from it. It's within you. It's always with you. I just had to experience this in this really nasty run-in that we had temporarily. But you're going to leave that run-in with that. I don't have to. I can squeeze that sponge out. I don't have to absorb this. And that's so we can open our hearts and have compassion to people who are cruel, who are mean, who are lonely. It's easy to be like, yeah, you deserve it. It's another way of being like, wow, that's tough. Your life is a reflection of your inner world, and you have a tough life that you've created. My heart goes out to you, dude who cut me off and flipped me off. And
it always brings me back to like value-based happiness versus material-based happiness. And that I've been around millionaires and billionaires and some really miserable people. And then you can go to a third world country where they have community and their little happy children, and they don't know any difference. And that's the piece of like perspective.
Yeah. And the last question that I didn't address, because I answered a different one, is like major moments in my life.
Oh, yeah.
Traveling. Well, I'm going all over. Is traveling, is going to different places and seeing the joy and the happiness and the simplicity, right? You go to poor areas, like objectively poor, deep below poverty. They're happy as shit.
Yep.
Right? Why? Because they don't care about gossip. They don't need to. They don't care about what Maria's doing next door or something that she said last weekend. Like they're focused on family, survival, community, right? They're working together. So that was one of the things that really shifted me was traveling. And then also going to places that filled me up with joy, like true penetrative, like, oh my God, this is as happy as I can feel. Doing experiences like that and following that thread more.
Likely lots of music for you.
A lot of music, yeah, which we don't have time to go into. But that point being of like with my path, it started with I can't take this anymore, like a straitjacket that kept getting cranked tighter and tighter and tighter until I finally broke free. And then once I broke free, I had nothing going on for the first time. What do I choose to do? And then it comes back to that feminine piece like we were talking about, right? Yeah. I got to do, checklist. What does it mean to just be? In that being, right? I have nowhere to go, no place to be, no version of me I'm expected to show up as. Like, there's no expectation here. What do I see? What do I pay attention to? What stands out? What am I called towards? And then you follow that, and that leads you into the unknown because it's not pre-planned, right? It is unknown future. And everything that awaits you on the other side of that is unplanned, right? It's not historical data sets being projected forward anymore. You're actually exploring undiscovered territory. And that's where everything started to shift for me. And I started to figure out who I am because I wasn't confined to all of the expectations and projections of who everybody else saw me as and expected me to be. Be the version of you that I know you to be, for me, for me, for me. When all that left, it was actually me who started showing up.
What's been really profound, at least the past few weeks for me, is with some of the stillness and not having like work in the back of my mind or the to-do list. Yeah. It's been a profound presence. So even sitting in this chair, there could be stories I hear before, but I'm so much more present and I'm hearing it differently. Or I was just in Jamaica and for the first time ever, like I'm waking up in the morning and I'm like, I'm not thinking, there's no tab that's work there. And I'm engaging with some of the Jamaican people that work on the resort, learning about their lives, talking to them, the little beach dog Sandy that I was hanging out with. Like, I was always present, but this was different. Yeah. This was like just completely there. And that was super, super powerful. And I feel like anyone starting on their journey of like, any kind of healing, like it has to be introspective. It has to start with us. It has to be that still time to allow yourself to think, allow yourself to feel. We've talked about alcohol, drugs, whatever. It's usually masking something so you're not feeling it.
Yeah.
Just super amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And our thoughts, right? There's stats about how many thoughts we experience in a day, like 100,000 or something like that. Our thoughts are a product of our past. Literally, our thoughts are a product of our past. So when we're not present and we're being inundated with thoughts, we're reinforcing the past, pushing it into the present moment, thus recreating it. So our past present becomes our future present because we can't escape the past thoughts projected, right? So presence is when we have a blank slate and the future present can become different than the past present. It takes getting still. It takes getting quiet because it's the only way new inspiration can show up that isn't based on the historical data set we've accumulated over time, which shows up in our thoughts and our feelings. Wow. So being present is you redesigning your life from scratch by being present with the moment and noticing what comes up and what opportunities are available. And that's actually turning the page and starting to write a new story, as opposed to doing that Bart Simpson thing where you're just repeating the same thing, repeating the same thing, repeating the same thing, repeating the same thing, which drives people crazy. And that's that piece of like, it's too late. I'm too old. Like, hell, it ain't. It's never too late. Right. It's never too late to kick smoking. It's never too late to get rid of alcohol. It's never too late to clean up the diet and get in shape. It's never too late to learn a new thing, to experience joy, to find the loving partnership that you've never had that you really want. It's never too late. You can be in hospice, still not too late. And that's the thing that people do. And honestly, to cop out, oh, it's too late. That's my excuse. I don't have to be happy, right? I don't have to live the life of my dreams. It's just too late. That's your cop out because you're afraid of failure, right? The most courageous thing to do is to blaze a new path, is to walk away from your job, leave a relationship that doesn't serve you, to stand your ground, to speak your truth. That's the most courageous thing. And it's scary as shit, right? Because people are going to misunderstand. They're going to project based on where they're standing, what they think, what they see us as. But if it's really true for us, it's easy to stand for the truth. Even when people are slinging bullets and arrows, if we're standing for somebody that's BS, standing for something that's BS, it's hard to stay standing, right? But if something is true and that's what you're here to do and that's your job, right? You can be crucified and it hurts and it keeps going, but that is so much more important than the pain or the discomfort that you're experiencing. And when we can find that in life, the thing that we're here to do, the thing that we're here to stand for, possibly die for, I know that's extreme, but that feeling of this is so much bigger than me, what you're doing and how this is. Or when you're
up against a $25 billion global, it's scary.
Am I gonna get the allies? Am I gonna get the resources that I need? Will I have the support? Am I guided? Am I protected? If this isn't true and this is like a popularity marketing play of any kind, then no, you will not get the resources, the protection, or the allies. Right. But if this is true, then it can't be any other way. Period. How that looks, we don't know. And that's a beautiful mystery of it. Because if we knew, right, that's a product of the past. Mm-hmm. As opposed to the beautiful mystery of what gets to unfold that I'm really not in charge of. Ultimately, your job is to show up. And here we are in the studio showing up.
It's my fucking responsibility.
It's your job. This is your job now. This is your life. And you're crushing it. Like, really, I'm so proud of you, how far you've come in the past 7-8 months of where it started and where you were at, what you were thinking about, what you were valuing. Like, you've always been incredibly powerful. You've always been dialed. And this claiming your power, claiming your role in your family unit, not being the daughter, but being the matriarch and recognizing that your mother looks up to you. Your mother is inspired by you. Your mother, your family loves you and cherishes you. That is what being a grown woman in the world is. Not under the umbrella of, I'm somebody else's baby. No, not anymore. Yes, I'll always be her baby. But I'm powerful. I'm a queen. I'm a leader. And my mom needs me to show up. That is my job. That is your job.
Try and get me to cry over here. It's going to work.
You're crushing it.
Well, I appreciate you so much. You have been a gift to my life, and I definitely wanted to have you on here. I'm so happy that you're here in Austin because you have so much to share with the world. So I want everybody to know Jordan and Liquid Gold's DJ name.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So much fun. Opportunity to just talk and philosophize and go deep. I'm here for it.
Thank you.
I support you. I love you.
Love you, boy.
Thank you for tuning into The Frequency of Courage. Please leave a review, share the show, and be courageous today.